WhiskyJason here, whiskey from the viewpoint of an American over here in Germany. Today I am going to be reviewing Blantons, the entire range that is available over here, the original, the gold, and the straight from the barrel. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about how a Japanese company came to own the rights of Blantons, the brand, and how Buffalo Trace, which is owned by Sazerac, actually makes the juice that we sometimes get to buy if we're lucky. All right, so Buffalo Trace distillery that we know today was established by Colonel E.H. Taylor back in 1870. It was called the OFC, the Old Fashioned Copper Distillery. All right, so that's what that was. And then we have here different people who actually ran the distillery. Captain, not Colonel, Colonel E.H. Taylor we just talked about, Captain George T. Stagg. Yeah, so he was actually at the distillery from 1878 up until the 1890s. Then came Colonel Albert B. Blantons. He ran the distillery from 1897 all the way up into 1952, when a man named Elmer T. Lee took over. Elmer T. Lee was the master distiller all the way up until 1985. All right, so now after him we have Gary Gayhart, guy we don't talk about much, but he actually was a very, very important person because after Elmer T. Lee went into retirement, he took over in 1972, was actually the master distiller there since 2000 up until 2005. And now we have our master distiller, our Harlan Wheatley, great guy. He's been there since 1995, so it's going to come up to almost 30 years starting next year. That's going to be really cool. All right, going back to the year 1949, Elmer T. Lee, after the war, walked through the door and was told that the distillery wasn't currently hiring. Now, the following week, Elmer T. Lee showed up anyways to work and was hired as a maintenance engineer. And after years of service, Lee climbed the ladder to become plant manager and master blender by 1969. He eventually retired in 1985, stayed on as the honorary master distiller for Buffalo Trace until he died 2013. Now, in the early 1980s, the distillery we now call Buffalo Trace was actually owned by Schenley. Schenley is a very important person in the from the World War II up until the 80s for anything with alcohol and whiskey in America. Seagram's don't have any more. Schenley we don't have any more, but they were important back then. All right, so in the early 1980s, we had the former CEO, the former president of Fleischmann's Distilling, Ferdy Falk and Bob Barnanaska. They founded a company called Age International Inc. Important name. We're going to have to talk about that in a moment. And they went to Schenley and they were hoping to purchase the Old Charter bourbon brand. Back then, maybe the best-selling bourbon in the world. Now, Old Charter wasn't for sale, but they walked out with the ownership of the George T. Stagg Distillery, later called Buffalo Trace, and the Ancient Age brand. They didn't get what they wanted, but they got a little bit something different. So Age International took over in 1983 the distillery called George T. Stagg Distillery back then, with Elmer T. Lee as the master distiller. And he was commissioned to create a new brand. Now, his idea was to have a single barrel bourbon. No one had done it before. All right, and it was going to be marketed and targeted towards Japan. Japan was the reason bourbon kept its head almost over water in the 1980s. Even single malt Scotch, let's just say Scotch, not just single malt, was actually in the 80s helped a lot by Japan. All right, so what did he do? The brand Blanton's was launched in 1984 to honor the man who once turned Lee away at the gates, his predecessor. Albert Blanton's. Albert Blanton said, no, we're not hiring. Elmer T. Lee came and worked anyways, worked his way up, got his job, and they had a wonderful, wonderful whiskey to target the only growing market in the world basically back then in the 80s for whiskey. Now, during the reign of Age International, 3 other single barrel bourbons were launched. So Elmer T. Lee had his own brand, 1986, he had already retired. Hill Rock Farms, 1990, and the Hancock Presidential Reserve, 1991. All right, so in 1991, Age International sold 22.5% of the stake to the Japanese Takara Shuzo Company. They were the importers of Blanton's there. Today we had exactly the same thing. Cooley worked together with Beam to export their Irish whiskey, and they sold the company to Beam, which later became Beam Suntory. Teeling worked together with Bacardi, had a minority interest on it, and they were the people that imported it all over the world, Teeling, and now they bought the entire company. And so with this minority stake in the company, they also had a veto right before the entire company could be sold to someone. So Age International actually in mid-1992 said, we're going to try to sell our company, our brands, Blanton's, Ancient Age, as well as the George T. Stagg Distillery, to a company called, I've never heard of it before, Häuptlein. Häuptlein was a sub-company of Grand Metropolitan, which I know, because 1997 Grand Metropolitan became Diageo. All right, and so before they could sell it to Grand Metropolitan, Häuptlein, they had 30 days, Taka Shuzo, to actually intervene. On the very last day before the contract was supposed to be finalized, Taka Suru announced their objection to the deal, and they themselves purchased the distillery and the brand. This is like almost like a movie, all right? So, by the way, the 30 days beforehand, they had been negotiating with Sazerac because they didn't want a distillery. They wanted the brand. And so what they did is they actually had negotiated with Sazerac that the next day after they took over ownership, they were going to sell everything that they didn't want over to Sazerac. So they would keep the brands, in particular Blanton's, that they wanted. So in 1992, the distillery, George T. Stagg back then, today Buffalo Trace, became part of the Sazerac company. And after a year, another year in 1999, the distillery was christened Buffalo Trace Distillery. They had a product. So they didn't have a product back then. They only had the distillery. And the master distiller, Gary Gayhart, started his career in 1972, but retired then in 2005. And he was the master distiller from 1999 to 2005. And then Harlan Wheatley was in charge. That was a lot of information, isn't it? Now, one thing I did not mention, and I want to mention here, is the company that owns the brand. It is not Age International. Some people write that. Age International has a subsidiary in Frankfort, Kentucky, with a little building with a little office. I'm going to call it a mailbox company, all right? So I'm sorry, people probably do work there. The main company is still today then our company that is called Takara. It's no longer called Takara Shuzo, it's just called Takara International. Do you know they own actually a distillery in Scotland? Oh, Ben Nevis is owned by Nikka. What is the other Japanese-owned distillery in Scotland? Some of you know this. I did not know that it was the same company. Tomatin. This is a single cask edition, but this is Tomatin. Tomatin is exactly the same company. All right, so Takara that owns the brand Blanton's. And that's why Blanton's used to only be available in international markets, because it wasn't an American brand. So they first introduced here the original. I think just 2 years ago they introduced the gold and straight from the barrel. All right, so I'm going to say the prices over here in Germany. All right, so this goes for 79 euros, which I think is pathetically too much. All right, 79 euros. The gold goes for 129 euros, which I think is still too much. And straight from the barrel goes for 179 euros, which I think is way too much. This is a single barrel. All of these are single barrels. Always warehouse age. That's the rule. In warehouse age, they have to age the barrels. My personal conspiracy theory is, I use the word conspiracy theory, is Blanton's used to not be such a hyped whiskey brand. And so they could actually allow them, they could allow the barrels to age for almost 8 years. Now, on the website, it still says between 6 and 6+ years. I think a lot of these, especially this one's more like 4.5 to 6 years. I think they've been pulling the barrels much, much earlier out of the warehouses to actually meet the global demand for Blantons. Was it the character in the film Reacher, or what, a preacher, a Reacher, John Wick? He always had Blantons and so on. Now, why did I say 79 euros, 129, and 179 is too much? Now, it used to be, and I'm talking 6 years ago, I'm talking 2018, 2017. This used to be 40 euros, 50 euros, 60 euros in Germany. I would pay those prices again. Now they've doubled, they more than doubled. All right. So instead of the 40, we now have the 80. Instead of the 50, we have now the 129. Instead of the 60, we have the 179. That's just way too much, in my opinion, for the quality of liquid that is given. All right. So I'm going to mention something else, and you're probably going to laugh, but Eagle Rare, I can still get it for under 40 euros over here. I can get 2 Eagle Rare 10-year-old whiskeys instead of 1 bottle of the original. I would get that anytime. I can buy it on Amazon today. Click, click, click. It'll be delivered tomorrow if I order before 10 p.m. Come on. What more do you want in a whiskey? A 10-year-old age statement, 45%. This is 46.5. It's Buffalo Trace, both of these. I would go for that every day of the week. This, as I said, is 129 euros with 55.5. I would go instead for a Four Roses single barrel with 50% ABV. I can get a single barrel Four Roses at the moment for under 40 euros. I think it's way underpriced. At 129, I can get 3 bottles of Four Roses single barrel and I still have change left over. That is unbelievable. And here, for 179, I can get Elijah Craig for under 80 euros over here. I can get the Jack Daniel's single barrel straight from the barrel for under 90 euros. It's about 85. So I'd get this and this for the price of that every day of the week. All right. So that's what I would do instead. That's just my personal opinion. I am not a fan of the juice. Now, this, we're going to try this, nose it. I actually get a tiny little bit of green, like young whiskey moments on here. It's not bad whiskey, all right? It's a C. This is going to be a C+. This is actually not going to be a C+. It's going to be more of a C. This is good whiskey. It's not bad whiskey. It's okay whiskey. But the prices are just so out of sync with reality that I, WhiskyJason, must advise you, buy something else. Go to a bar, get a pour, go to a whiskey festival, get a pour, enjoy a little bit and see for yourself. Now, if you are going to get a pour, ask, if possible, tell them the date that the bottle was bottled. All of mine were from the year 2023. All right, here we have the 23rd of January 2023. Here we have the date of the 23rd of May 2023. And over here we have the 21st of February 2023. All right, so Because if you have an older bottle, maybe 2016, 17, even 18, 19, maybe even up to 20, they're going to taste much better. Not because of old bottle flavor, but because they actually aged the whiskey. In my personal opinion, no facts, no secret informant told me that, but my taste buds say the older bottles were aged longer. These are not. All right, so ask, hey, going to buy a modern bottle, take a look at that. And this is something that has happened with some hyped brands, Blantons, for example, over the years here. The quality has gone down, the price has gone up. Ta-da! So some of you are screaming at the screen, just like Elijah Craig. They used to always have 12, and now it's not. And we still want to have that 13-year-old Elijah Craig barrel proof, don't we? That was supposed to be awesome. All right, so enough ranting here. On the nose, as I said, I do get caramel, I do get tobacco, I do get pecan. I get a whiff of the greenness of the wood. 46.5%. Cheers. Mm. Mm. Yeah. C minus, as I said. It's a little bit of a nuttiness, even a little bit of like a raw peanut nuttiness. And the alcohol is a little bit hot for its 46%, 46.5%. As I said, Eagle Rare, €10, any day of the week, but I know in many, many places in America, you haven't seen it for a while. I'm sorry. I'm spoiled for choice sometimes over here. The gold, 50.5. There was actually, this all comes from one importer. We have, just like in Japan, we have one importer. Also in Germany, there's one importer for Blantons. They're called Schlumberger. And one of the main sales manager, there was a lot of whiskey festivals. He would always push this. He said, hey, have you ever had a good bourbon? I don't try this. I was like, oh, good. And they bought the bottle. The gold is often, depends on the single barrels, often the best of all of them. Is it worth 129? No. All right. But here, a little bit more of a brown sugar, a little bit more of an allspice moment, a little bit more of the niceness of a good bourbon. Cheers. Mm. Even a little bit of berries. Alcohol is much better of an integration there. I do think, how can I say this? I do think that they pulled more of the honey barrels for the gold than they did. This is just anything that's left over. Okay, just put it in there. There used to be a green label with 40% alcohol that was for Japan. We actually got it with travel retail sometimes. I haven't seen it for 6-7 years. All right, so this is a C plus whiskey. Now, value for money, both of these are D's. As I said, I would not go out and pay my hard-earned money for Blantons again. One bottle, yes, of course, I've got to try it. It has the FOMO, the fear of missing out. But would I go out again and again and again and always have on the shelf? Definitely not. All right, now straight from the barrel with 63.1% ABV. So for you in America, 126.2 proof. And we actually have here barrel number 375. If I really think about it, I don't think I've ever seen, let's just take a look at the other bottle. So we have here 651 barrel number. We have here 303. I don't think I've had a 4-digit Blanton's number. Oh, I'm going to take a look here. 1 second. Okay, I was just thinking I haven't seen any 4-digit barrel numbers. Just took a look at Whiskey Base. Of course, I find 4-digit barrel numbers. Not often, but every once in a while I find 1575. I found a 3301. So I just did the math real quick. Imagine we had per year, because they actually do it per year, I think. They start the numbers again. We have 3,333 barrels we do a year. and I times it by 200 bottles because you get 200 bottles out of a barrel normally, that would still be 666,600 bottles per year. That's a lot. That's over 500,000 bottles. All right, so 500,000 of each of these, but maybe it's not that right because it'd be only 500,000 in total. So, uh, okay. So how many question of the day? Maybe someone really knows this. I have to actually maybe go over there and talk with our master distiller and ask Harlan, how many bottles of Blantons do you actually bottle a year? That'd be good. What is your guess? I'm gonna guess about 500,000. 500,000 sounds like a lot, but I don't think it really is for the whole world. All right, so how many bottles of Blanton do they bottle a year? Question of the day. Second question of the day, and I'll try the straight from the barrel, is what is your favorite? Is it the original? Is it the gold? The gold is sold a lot in Germany. Or is it the straight from the barrel proof, in this case with 63.1%? It's very, very herbal, herbaceous. More so than I wanted, I think. I even get a little bit of barrel char here, a little bit of a barbecue moment here. Like a Tootsie, like a burnt Tootsie Roll is what I'm getting. Cheers. Definitely my winner. Now the alcohol is fairly well integrated. A little bit of heat at the end. Um, One, two, three. This really disappointed me. This I liked. Okay, this is a C plus. This is also a C plus, and this is a C minus. All right. Less sweetness than I was expecting. More of that herbaceousness. A little bit of that Tootsie Roll caramel moment, chocolatey. Um, I think I still prefer an Elijah Craig. About 4 years ago, I did a blind tasting. I put barrels proof bourbons in there. I had a Stag Junior. I had a Blanton straight from the barrel. I had a Booker's. I had Elijah Craig. I think it was the Noah's Mill. And I had a six product there. Oh, yeah, Tennessee. I had this one. The Tennessee single barrel proof. This one. Close followed by the Elijah Craig. What was last place? Guess. The Blantons straight from the barrel. With a large margin last. Do blind tasting of 5, 4, 6 different cask strength bourbon products. I feel my experience has shown me Blanton's has a tough time being up there with the best of the best. It's not bad, but it's just not worth. It's not worth 179 euros in my book or most other people's books I know here. But as I said, hey, FOMO, you have to try it at least once. You should buy a bottle at least once. Of course, the horses. So this is actually the B. So this is actually before the race starts, and it goes all the way up to S. I have two N's here, and it actually shows the different motions of the horse during the horse race. So if you have Blanton's, Blantons. Oh, that's the question. Do I have two different Blantons? I have two N's here, but they're exactly the same N's. So they're exact. Okay, one's gold, one's normal. Yeah, but this is a absolute great marketing ploy. All right, so that they made the hand grenade, they made the beautiful bottle, they made the nice little cork topper with the horse, you have to collect them all. Come on, they created fear of most missing out before bourbon had the fear of missing out, so you have to get them all. Before Pokemon was even a thing, Blanton's was doing it back in 1984. Well done, Elmer T. Lee there. All right, so thank you very much for watching, liking, subscribing, maybe sharing. Yeah, what is your favorite Blantons, and what's your guess at how many bottles of Blanton are bottled a year for the world, for Japan, for Europe, for North America, for South America, for Asia, for Africa, for the whole world? How many bottles a year are bottled there at Frankfort, Kentucky, or wherever they bottle it at for Buffalo Trace? Thank you very much for watching. All the best. See you soon. Bye-bye.